In our industry, the pressure is real, and burnout, anxiety, and depression are a growing challenge among people. The constant demand to perform, it takes a serious toll. 80% of tech workers report mental health symptoms, but only 40% receive treatment. To me, that says we're not talking about it, and maybe just normalizing it could be a massive first step. In tech, we optimize everything: systems, workflows, pipelines, but who looks after the people behind the screen? Welcome to Mind Middleware, a podcast about the invisible space between doing and being. And in each episode, we speak with someone from the tech world about the mental and emotional journey behind their career. Join us in this journey of empathy, compassion, vulnerability, and openness.
At the end of 2021, I was finishing a contract and doing interviews for my next gig. I was also demotivated to stay in the industry even. I felt like I was lacking purpose. I felt like there was no future in the industry for me. One of those interviews was with Frazer Scott. Fraser has a long history in the industry. He has a long history of executive roles, leading people, and being a culture champion. I remember in their interview thinking, this is a person I could really enjoy working for. This is a person who I could really have deeper conversations with. And throughout the years, I learned that the vulnerability that he brings as a leader is what made me continue pushing for the things that I wanted, for the things that we wanted. The type of leadership that tells you that being vulnerable is okay, that not being okay is okay. Fast forward a couple of years, and as I was thinking about this podcast, I couldn't help to go back to that conversation in my head and thinking, Fraser is the right person to talk to. He is the right first guest. Hi, Fraser. Thank you for being here.
Of course.
How are you?
Tired. Good, but tired.
Good. Good tired?
Yeah, I just had like a bucket list experience. I took Monday and Tuesday off and played golf at Curry Cliffs.
Nice.
That's where I was the last couple of days.
Did you win?
No. Golf was the winner on the day, but it was just an experience. You know, even though as crap as it was, one of those moments you're looking at the view going, okay.
Were you expecting to win?
No. I was expecting to have fun and I did, but I was just a bit exhausted after that. It was windy and cold and blah, but it was awesome.
That's good.
Yeah.
Thanks again for being here. For people who wouldn't know who you are out there, why don't you tell me, what's your human doing? What are the things that you do day in, day out at work?
The human doing. So I'm in the process of changing jobs. So for the last 6.5 years, I was the chief executive of Plan B Limited. Mm-hmm. As you know, many people would know, in December, Plan B was acquired by a company based in Australia called Atura. And nowadays I am the country manager for New Zealand, for Atura New Zealand, and having a lot of fun with that. Day to day, it's around helping create the strategy for the company, and then leading teams to execute against that strategy and making sure we're doing the right thing by customers, right thing by the company, and trying to help solve customers' problems with technology.
Enjoying it?
Love it. Yeah, love it. Love the ambiguity, love the change, love the dynamism, love the people. So yeah, having fun.
Good. And before that, you held a myriad of different roles.
Yep.
From more junior roles to executive roles.
Yeah.
Was that a long journey?
It doesn't feel like it now from this perspective. Maybe if you'd asked me some years ago, I might have said yes. I don't think, I should say, I know that leadership wasn't a thing I thought about when I was younger. And in fact, when I was like at high school and things like that, definitely was not a leader. In any way, shape or form. And it probably wasn't until I really got into business and then I got inside of larger corporates like Sony Electronics, where I was working for a period of time, where I had that moment of going, oh, these people around me maybe aren't as like that much smarter than me or that much more capable of experience. And that sort of started piquing my curiosity, and that actually led me back into education as well, because I left school halfway through my last year to go and work in a retail job. Then I went back into education. That just kind of, that was unfinished business, so went back and did that as part of my, I guess, my management training.
And that's a good segue on a couple of things. Number one is, that's your human doing.
Yeah.
Your human being must have been affected throughout that process, I assume.
Say more?
Do you feel, yes, I will. Do you feel that, or do you think that your sense of identity changed throughout those years? And how did that affect you, and particularly your mental health?
I think there's a bit there. A few things I think about when you're asked that question, Diego, is I think another way to say it, we all have imposter syndrome. I don't know anyone who doesn't. Maybe people don't admit it and acknowledge it, but we all have it. I've spent most of my career wondering when the shoe was going to drop and someone's going to realise this guy's, and so I think
know now.
it's on record. So I think I went through many periods of adjusting through that as I got into leadership and going, hey, who am I? What am I? Confidence. But that was in the quiet moments. I think in the job it was never that. It was always a lot of comfort, assuredness. But yeah, certainly in those 3 a.m. moments, a lot of that. What else would I say about that? I shared another story with you previously about that kind of moment of being where I was lucky enough when I was working at Microsoft to get involved with a business executive coach. And he is someone I'd brought into the business to actually help train other people. And then my leader at the time said, hey, I think the whole leadership team should get some time with Peter. That's Peter's name. And I had my first one-on-one with him. I'd worked with him many times, but not on me, on the team. So we sat, we chatted, we actually meditated for the first time I'd ever done that. And as we were going through our conversation, and I'll just pause there to say this was a time where I was commuting to Sydney on a regular basis. We were expecting our first child. Career was going well. And I was on the direction to become a director at Microsoft, which is kind of the first real material level of seniority inside the company. And I was on a path to get that. And I was having this session with Peter. We'd had the meditation, we'd had the chat. And as we were talking, he just said to me, so Fraser, who are you? And I just shut down. I was like, well, what do you mean, who am I? He's like, no, who are you? And I could not answer the question. Such an obvious, simple question, I had no words. 3 minutes later, I'm bawling. And what he had picked up on is that I had, maybe using your language, there was a human being doing gap. Growing up in a nuclear family in rural New Zealand, mum and dad at home all the time, I had these values of family first. Whereas who I was actually turning up at work as was, it's about me, it's my career, selfish. And he had picked that in me, and he had picked this gap between these two identities that I had, as schism, I think is probably a good word for it. And he just T-boned me with that one question, who are you? And I just go, oh. Yeah, so that was a moment, probably one of the biggest, professional, personal, health moments I've had, which I've drawn my attention to from time to time.
Right. Were you able to, at some point later on, answer that question?
I have. I think the answer keeps changing. I don't think it's ever static. I think the moments I've had where I come to answer who I am, it's actually less about the answer, but it's about, is there a gap?
Right.
So whatever the answer is probably perfectly fine as long as there is an answer, as long as you're not being two different people, if you're the one person. Because that's what he said to me. He was like, if you're a career-oriented person and your family comes second, maybe that's okay as long as you and your partner and your family are on that journey, right? Mm-hmm. Which at the time was not the case because I wasn't even aware of it. So, yeah, I don't know if there's ever really a clear answer on that question.
It's also a good segue to, thank you for that. I like to ask the question of, if you could equate your job to a metaphor, what would that be? What would that metaphor for work and the relationship that you have with work, what would that metaphor be?
Yeah, and so this is something I learned years ago, and I'm fully confident I've subconsciously plagiarized this.
Sure.
Because I'm not that smart. But
we'll fact check you.
Yeah. For me, the idea of work, and I used to teach people to this when I was, new employee orientation type stuff, is you have really three legs to a stool. Imagine the metaphor is it's a stool. It has three legs. Mm-hmm. One of those legs is your health and wellness. Mm-hmm. One of those legs is your career. Mm-hmm. And one of those legs is relationships. Mm-hmm. Family, friends, spouse, etc. It could be a four-legged stool if you read spirituality into that, but that's a personal decision. And so for me, the metaphor of the stool was it's always out of balance, my experience lived. Mm-hmm. When you're focusing on your career, it means you're not spending enough time at the gym or working on your health and wellness. If you're focusing on your family, your career maybe isn't getting the attention it deserves. And I think I identified this problem and I started trying to get equilibrium. Mm-hmm. And then I realized, oh, no, that's not the journey. Mm. And maybe there are people out there who have achieved that, but for me, it's not about getting equilibrium. It's about having acceptance of the fact that that stool is never in balance. Mm. But be mindful and attentive of where it is. And if you have to have conversations or trade-offs with yourself or with other people around you about where that attention is at that time, that's okay, but attend to that. That's probably the biggest metaphor and the biggest learning I've had.
Thank you. That's a good one. What are the signs, if any, that you start picking upon when you feel that imbalance? Do you have any signs that you recognize?
Yeah, if I'm getting overly frustrated about anything, I have a very short
jumpiness.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a short. Well, I have a short attention span. I also have a very short temper. Period. But I kind of manage that. But if I'm finding I'm constantly getting triggered by something, that's usually a warning of, hey, something's out of whack here. The physical one or the self one is easier. It's like, do I feel good or do I feel like crap? Have I been to the gym? Have I been taking time out for physical or mental wellness?
Yep.
Those ones are usually pretty quick to come to life, yeah.
And so moving on to burnout, for example, throughout the years with the pressure that you must have felt with all those roles, what was your experience with burnout, and what are the things that people out there can, start recognizing when they maybe they don't know that this is what burnout looks like?
My mind goes to two places when you talk about that. One, new job. I might be able to come back to that one. The only other time in my career I've been outside of a new job environment, being close to burnout was in my previous life at Microsoft, where I was about the same time as my previous conversation I had about that realization of the schism, but I was actually working in a role which I'd really fallen out of love with. I had a big role. It was fabulous. The product was fabulous. The company, the team, everything. But I was traveling a lot, and I just didn't have it in me anymore. I was pretty broken. Physically, I was broken. And I remember going and talking to my boss at the time, David, and just said, I'm done. And again, going back to my previous story, he was like, if you deliver your numbers this year, I'll get you to the director level, as much as you can promise these things inside of a big company. Yeah. But he was supportive of that, and I just went, yeah, that's not the thing anymore. I need out. And he goes, what do you want to do? And I told him, because there's no point having a problem if you don't have a solution, I told him what I thought the solution was. And within like an hour, he had spoken to his boss, and he came back to me and said, write your job description. And I did, and then I created this thing for myself, which then actually got replicated in different parts of the world and became part of my executive strategy career. And for me, it was a sign of, one, an amazing company, two, great management and leadership, but actually just owning your shit, because I could have kept doing that thing for a period of time, but I do not know what the consequences of that would have been. Career, physical, relationships, or anything. But, you know, it correlates with not sleeping. That's usually a dead giveaway for me. If I wake up dreaming about work, that's time for a holiday.
I'm the same.
Yeah. That 3 a.m., why am I dreaming about that thing, you know? That's a giveaway. But does that kind of answer that question a little bit?
It does. It really, really does. And I wonder what so there's a clear relationship there with vulnerability. You were able to be vulnerable with your boss at that time and have this conversation. And I have experienced firsthand how you behave with that, how you picked on...
it doesn't sound good.
Up, sorry. Yeah, sorry. I'll delete that. How you picked up on how to lead from the vulnerability perspective. And I've been super open about my mental health with you, and you've always been very, very supportive. I guess the question there is, are you comfortable being vulnerable? Are you comfortable having those conversations? Is that something that comes natural to you?
Yeah, so I don't know where that came from, because, I don't know where I learnt that, perhaps is a better way to say it, because people have different views of me, because I'm borderline introversion extrovert. I, depending on the day and the time, I can be one thing or the other. And I probably naturally go introvert more. But I've also, as part of my learnings, become really self-aware, I think. I know when I'm being a dick. It's my default mode, perhaps. Jokes. But I think self-awareness, if you go back to how did you get into leadership, it was actually just being aware of where my value was and the things I was good at, was not good at, where I needed help, etc. And is also still the number one thing I hire for in any interview I do, is just how well do you know yourself? Because if you understand yourself, generally you can be coached.
On the topic of moving forward, because we get burnt out, we have imposter syndrome. I also don't know anybody who doesn't, so you're spot on with that. Which takes me to something that you introduced me to, the things that give you energy and the things that take energy from you. You spoke a little bit about the things that take energy from you and the things that you have felt through all these years. But perhaps a more pointy question around what are the things that take energy from you and what are the things that give you energy?
Yeah, take energy is negativity, pessimism, cynicism, whether that's at work or social. I just, people that are negative about things or bullying or any of that, I just have it's a physical reaction. And sometimes I just have to exclude myself from situations like that. Confusion and lack of structure can do that a bit too. Conversely, what gives me energy? I love change. So weird that lack of structure over here takes energy. But it's interesting at the minute with this organisational change that we're going through, I'm watching people who are just cannot handle not knowing what might be coming 12 months in the future. And that's fine. It's just how you have to communicate and think through those strategies, where I'm just like eating it up. I just like going, oh, that's cool.
Yep.
Yeah, these things happen. And maybe that's a lived experience because I've been in those situations before more than perhaps other people. It's also a thinking style. But yeah, positivity, change, dynamism, excitement, people, diversity of people, all those things give me energy.
That's great.
My wife would tell you also anything that involves acquiring a lot of accessories. Like she thinks I get into sports, not for the sport, but
give
for
you
the
energy, you mean?
all the little things around the outside that you can acquire, which is ironic since I've discovered golf, because apparently there is no end of things you can acquire for that.
I tend to agree. I think the enjoyment of a new activity is directly proportional to the amount of money that you spend on accessories. I think that's the way that I say it.
I can see the formula written on the wall.
Absolutely. So thank you for that. Thank you for that. And so for people out there who will be taking notes and things out of this, do you have any grounding things that you do? Do you have any recommendations for people out there in terms of when you're feeling this way, this is what I do and maybe it will work for you?
Yeah, I can only share my experiences because everyone's going to be very different about it. I think one thing what do I do? Having an outlet that's physical, whether it's golf, mountain biking, gymming for me, is important. I don't use it enough, but that's a great de-stressor, a great head clearer. I think that's well celebrated. Mindfulness, I do, and that can be anything from proper full meditation or just spending time looking at a whiteboard with a marker in your hand and just see what comes out. That's a real good thing. I'm not great. As bizarre as this conversation is perhaps I'm not as great sitting down at home and just clearing everything that's going through my head, because sometimes that's just the selfish me as well. And that stems from I can spend all day just giving to other people, and when you get home, the last thing I want to do is talk about anything to anyone.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's absolute shit, and it's unfair on my family.
Yep.
So that's a work on. But yeah, I think, and that's a big work on for me. But I think having those mechanisms and just being clear about when they are, when you need to activate them, and who those people might be that you can chat to. The driving range is also fantastic. Go smack some balls.
I want to go back for a second to, you mentioned when you had that first meeting with Peter, you meditated. How did that feel for you?
Unreal. And I don't think I ever tried it, because there's different meditations I've learned, right? Yes. And I'm going to probably there's probably 50, but the two I kind of think of is one where you're trying to clear your mind of anything, whether it's a flame or the breath or whatever, which is perhaps where I'd go to the most. The one he did for me was a guided meditation where he actually walked me through a scenario of going to a place and walking up a mountain path and all these things, and it was deeper metaphors, I know. But then he got me to go to a place of comfort or safety, which was the house I grew up in, and one of the things was, is there, can you find a message there? Is there anything here for you? And I heard my dad's voice as clear as a bell.
Whoa.
I don't know why that got emotional, but my dad's voice just said to me, it's okay. And I don't, for the life of me, and my dad's still alive, by the way.
Yeah.
But for the life of me, I don't know what the root of that point was, but it was an amazingly deep serenity, would perhaps the best word I can think of. Just the peace that hit so hard when I heard that. I was like, oh, it'll be okay.
Wow.
Yeah. forgotten about that.
I'll pause it for a second.
Yeah. No, I'm
Give it
good.
a minute.
I'm good. No, I'm fine.
Thank you. Speak of being vulnerable. That's amazing. Do you have times where do you still go back to that place?
Oh, yeah, I've tried. Yes, I have. I've done the same meditation. Peter actually recorded it for myself and perhaps others to use it as well. I believe it was called the relaxation response. And I have used it, never had the same experience, but it's still a great meditation. And perhaps ever since then, I've tended to lean towards guided meditation, like Headspace apps and things like that.
Yep.
Just really help you think through the process, because, go and sit in a room by yourself. It's challenging. With this brain, it's challenging to sit there,
To quiet it down.
Oh,
Quiet
yeah.
the monkey,
Yeah.
they say. Cool. So I'll move away from that space for a second,
No,
if
I'm
that's
fine.
okay with you.
No, you can go anywhere you want to go.
I have this idea, and it might be just an idea, that we don't talk about mental health in our industry, in the tech industry, enough. After I started having that narrative to myself and my own unconscious bias, I had a few people saying, yeah, but you're more advanced than other industries, which is the same as saying, there are other problems in the world that you could be solving, which is a bit of a moot point. I would love to hear your opinion on the state of mental health conversations and maybe even resources in our industry. What do you think?
So I wrote an article for a business partner of ours, the People Project, asked me to contribute to their views on Mental Health Awareness Week, I think it was. And I think I was pretty clear that it's a under-addressed conversation. I'll come to resources in a minute. Working in the tech industry was the first time I ever came across EAP, Employee Assistance Programs. They may be more commonly spread, I just do not know. Whereas there are resources within EAP organisations generally for support, counselling, mental health, and I think that's fantastic. But they're very limited. I think the industry as a whole is genuinely forward-thinking in most areas, kind of goes along with the technology bent. So I think there is a lot more openness to it. But as I've spoken with you about, I think the challenge for me as a leader is just feeling completely under-equipped, or unequipped, I should say, in that I don't have any answers, and it's okay, isn't an answer, All I can do is be there for people when they need me and say whatever I can and try and corral resources. But, if someone cuts their arm, whatever, hurts themselves, I think we all know how to help with that and call the doctor and blah, blah, blah. But I also know through experiences that people with mental health, just trying to get hold of resources is so hard. And where even health insurance companies don't cover mental health issues, it's kind of going, well...
Correct.
And I don't know the why. I don't know why they do not. There may be reasons I haven't considered, but that's a gap right now as well.
So, thank you. And yes, I agree with all of that. I don't think it's our job to solve the why people like, insurance companies don't cover for that. But it is absolutely our job to have the conversation and just to give space. And I will give you huge credit for giving that space. Like, I've had the privilege of working with you and for you for 3.5 years or so. And the space that you give us, it's really commendable. So thank you for that.
Yeah, but you crafted that space. You took the space. And that's not about me deferring. I'm saying, you were someone that had a point of view. Thus this.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
you might be right. Yep. Thank you for saying that. It begs the question, what do you think as an industry we should be doing? And
sorry, Caroline. Yep.
I was going to make the comment that I sit here as no expert. I am not an expert. I am not a professional in mental health. I have no qualifications more than mental health first aid accreditations that I've done. So I don't know what the answers are. This is just about opinion. Just giving you and myself the space to have the conversation.
Yeah. So it's with a high degree of ignorance that I even attempt to answer that question. But perhaps the only place I can start is actually not even the industry, but maybe using me as a proxy, is actually just some more tools to understand and to have awareness. Not for diagnosing, but just how do I help people? How do I maybe see signs that I might be misinterpreting? Yeah, it's because otherwise it gets a bit dangerous if we try and do more than that.
Absolutely.
Even first aid's barely enough, and physical first aid.
Yep.
So perhaps for me that would be the number one step: acknowledgement, support, and then some sort of, hey, here's a bit of a toolkit that you might think about as a leader. Because I don't think isn't as experienced as you are and with the experiences you have had, and you're saying, well, I'm not the guy to fix that. Yeah, same for me.
Thank you. I'll ask a final question. Given everything that we have discussed and the fact that we know that there's pressure out there and that there's stress out there and that there are people who are maybe now, understanding the signs of stress and burnout and imposter syndrome and so on, all the way from someone who's just got out of uni and started, or someone who feels the isolation of an executive role, if you could whisper something on each and every one of them tomorrow before they start work, what would that be?
The answer is, it's a simple one, and is you are enough. And I choose those words because it's kind of led from the imposter syndrome place. Is I think doubt, self-doubt, is a really undermining. It's a fine sword, right? A little bit of self-doubt gives you pause, reflection, learning. Too much of it, and you're crippled and you don't act. So, telling people that they're enough, and for us to actually, all of us, to absorb that and know that, I think everything. This industry is amazing. Growing up on a farm, what am I doing here? It's the opportunity, the challenges. You can go and, I've been blessed to work with or be a leader to people who are doing amazing things globally in technology. And to have been a fraction of their career or a slight influence or maybe a word here or there that's helped them. I love that. But those are people who I've seen them go through their journey of doubt. And that would be an important one. And also, and one thing I know I've shared with you before is, for everybody who's perhaps waking up, as you said, and thinking about going for that big job, do it. As I've told you, the words I use is, if you're a high performer, if the next job in your career doesn't scare the shit out of you, you shouldn't do it. If you think you can do the job already, wrong job. Move on. Take something that really terrifies you, because you'll grow. Now, depending on how big that is, that could be 6 months. For me, twice it's taken 2 years. 2 years to learn a different industry, and both times actually slightly different industries from where I came from. Technology related, but different role, different industry. And I was lucky enough to be in a position where I had the time to do that. But that was how big the leap was. 2 years to get to a point where I go, yeah, I've got this. So yeah,
I can imagine the journey throughout those 2 years. From not knowing to I think I got this. There's usually a lot of pressure that comes with that.
Oh, there's also moments of delusion too, where 3 months in you think I've got this, and you're like, I don't. 6 months I got this. I don't.
Yeah.
Oh, there is, and there's everything in between. There's anxiety, there's stress, there's sleepless nights, there's mistakes that you make. Oh my God. But we make mistakes every day in our jobs. No one's perfect. They perhaps hit harder at that stage in your career when you're learning that job. You really reflect on them. But the learning, every 6 months in your career, if you look back, I've taught this to a lot of people, every 6 months, stop and think about where you were 6 months ago. And usually the change is more than you would ever think you were capable of as an individual. The impact you're having, the problems you're solving, the way you're dealing with ambiguity, whatever it might be.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here with me. It's been a pleasure. Is there anything else you want to convey or tell people, or for them to know, or?
No, I thought about some of the things you were saying before, and I think we're all works in progress. I know I am. One of the things I shared with you before, I was on a bus ride into the city reflecting on something you'd said about the whole human being, human doing thing. And I realised I'm far more happy being a human doing, because I'm not sure I like who I am as a human being. The gap between where I am and who I should be, that actualisation gap, whatever it is, it feels like a freaking chasm a light year away. But I'm aware of it. And so, yeah, that's something.
Labeling it.
Labeling it, knowing it, that's a work on.
That's awesome.